Science is violence when negating the experience in favor of a translation which attempts to separate observing from the experience, to objectify.
And that is very nicely preempted by that statement of the problem at the beginning of the century, that consciousness is continuous. And as soon as there's a subconscious that we can translate, we put all the attention there. So every time there is something we can talk about, all the attention goes there. And because we're in it all the time, it is very difficult to reflect on what I am talking about doing it now.
Now, when? When?
A year ago, I would have said, what is violence? Today, I would like to do something around when is violence. And in addition to when is violence, I would like, in the piece, to make a distinction between a witness and an observer.
I, the observer, determine when is violence.
No, you determine what is violence.
I determine what is violence
Yes.
because I feel it. I have
No,
interpreted
because you say so.
Because I say so. And that's okay to give me that right.
For you, it's okay.
And once I say that, it is violence.
No. Violence is if one of the participants in the violent action says it's violence. You are an observer.
He's done something, I call it violence.
But-
I say violence!
But you
But he
say,
says that wasn't violence.
was it done to you?
Yes, it was done to me.
Then you were not an observer.
I'm not an observer, I'm a participant.
Yes.
What happens when we disagree? I call it violence, he says not.
Now then we will have, that you say it's violence, he says not, then I will listen to you.
Because I am
But then is violence. Whether it's what is violence or not, is quite
When
there's a
is
social
violence?
phenomenon. The phenomenon starts the moment somebody says, I had suffered violence. That's when it begins.
I'm just trying to make this clear for myself.
And finish your question.
A year ago, I would have said, what is violence? Today, I would like to do something around when is violence.
This is a very, very fundamental shift from what is violence to when is violence. Because when is violence, we are there. But what is violence, we are not there, we are here.
The predicament of self-reference is that I am continuously reflecting on what I'm doing, whether I make it explicit or not. All these levels, allegedly regressive levels, are not regressive because where I actually am is where I actually am.
I am in the present. I was in the future. I shall be in the past.
What is violence is one thing, if we talk all the time, inadvertently or advertently, about whether we know what violence is. I insist that we do not know what violence is, but we know when violence is. Violence is then when somebody says so. The step from the almost trite conversation, what is violence, which can be answered immediately, to the question, when is violence and when is not violence. When is violence, when is not violence becomes of first importance. If we want to bring about some drastic and radical change in the society, and want to do that without having been called violent, we have to know how to do that. And this know-how is missing.
If things are what is said, when said about them, then we are generating, inventing, creating our cultures, what we want and desire. Are we creating what we want and desire? What would be really neat is if we could hold it and then have a conversation about this violence thing. That would be really neat. I just thought of that.
I went to the ghetto to see Sabrina. And I was only in the house for a minute or two, and I left my bag in the car, and when I came outside, my bag was gone. And in my bag was the master tape that existed prior to this video tape. And I was devastated. I went running around the ghetto looking for people. It wasn't a ghetto I know very well. Talking to people, I was devastated because I had lost the master tape that I had been working on to make this video from What to When is Not Violence for the last year. And this was the tape I had been working on since August of '95. And it was gone. I found myself in an undesirable and created a desirable situation, which is when I said, I'm going to redo this video.
Yes, which was non-violence.
Which was not violent. Exactly.
Yeah.
The episode of the disappearance of your bag is an interesting one because what you said was desirable was not desirable. It's not a desirable thing.
No, it was not desirable. I was
But you could leave it as a starting point.
You could leave that as
As a starting point.
the undesirable.
No, the fact that it disappeared and then disappears, so it's not there anymore. It's a
The
starting
point of departure.
Because part of our problem, I was thinking, with respect to taking the violence as, you say, as the information, it's telling you something.
What's the message?
What's the message? Now, to do that means taking it as a starting point. Instead of suppressing it, you take it as a starting point. It's telling you something. And what it's telling you is how it arose.
Yes.
You could look at it. So you could treat it as a starting point. And I think that this is a very good thing because, in a way, this is our problem with situations of violence. We do not take them as starting point to do things such that they will not arise again.
Excellent, yes.
That would turn it into a message.
Turn it into a
And you
message.
do not say, before there was some remark, when is violence when somebody says so? In the beginning you said so. You broke into tears and you cried all night. All the time saying that's violence. So everybody stood around and said that's violence. Then you switched.
Enough
You
of
did
that.
not say anymore it's violence, so it stopped being violence. We cannot use it as a recipe, but it is an observation that fits onto this case. If you make it a recipe, it's dangerous.
Yeah, exactly.
It is an exceptional situation and ought to be told. But as somebody who has seen the movie.
When is not violence?
When is no violence? This is the question.
Right?
When violence is heard as a message, and one acts according to the message that one hears.
The problem with violence is, even if we listen to the message and then not punish the perpetrator, but rather the situation which is undesirable, if we can do that, then we, at least after the act of violence, interrupt the circularity of it.
The loop. Break the loop.
Yes. I do not know when somebody is assaulted and afterwards one listens to the message whether it is thereby less violence. I would not say that to the assaulted person, at least.
Right.
Which will not undo what happened,
That's right.
but will be a starting point for something different.
That's what I call cutting the loop. Yeah. Even the behavior towards the so-called victim of the violence will change drastically from what it is now. So there is an undesirable present. How can one let the present transform itself into a more desirable? There is always the idea of radical change. The radical change takes place in the mind.
Just one more question for now. Where is mind? And so I began to find out then by listening the difference between repetition and insistence. And it is a very important thing to know. You listen as you know. I think you also know as you listen. That's recursion, I think.